All right, so I wanted to start this meeting to follow up on my social media post that I put out yesterday. Finally, like acknowledging my privilege to the world, and follow up and take it a step further with you guys. Because another thing that even this experience has made me acknowledge is racism and my racism. Because I've read things before that say that if you are contributing to structures and institutions that are keeping other people down, that are institutionalized racism, you are racist. And I'm absolutely am doing that in my life, and not fighting enough against it. But the concept again that white people are racist, and how tough that is to hear, and that people think of racist, they think of yelling out the N-word or going to Klan rallies or stuff like that, when racism runs so much deeper. Those people to me are long gone. We're not going to convince them at this moment that they're going to change their mind, but the people you can convince are people like me, allies, right? Allies who say they're allies, who do support the cause, but aren't doing enough to support the cause, and aren't putting their money where their mouth is, and buying from Black businesses, and not putting their money where their mouth is, and supporting, our undocumented students and their families. And I've got young kids. I was um, what's the word? I was shocked, offended by what's happening at our borders with putting kids in jail, but I didn't do anything about it. I wasn't down there marching. I wasn't down there, or even on social media posting about how terrible this is. I wasn't calling my representatives. I wasn't following leadership, Latino leadership in that case, on what to do to change this. I do have a lot of white family members that were, but I wasn't. And so that kind of stuff needs to change from me, and I need to do a way better job for you, because I absolutely love you guys. I consider you guys family to me, and you guys are closer than most of my other students because of this, intense journey that we've been on the last couple months. And I think I looked up; it's not even like a couple months. Like our first official meeting was like a month ago. I think it was May 5th or something like that. But it's not just you guys. Like I care and love my students in a way that is not, I don't think you get that much in society. You don't get that much with jobs. And I know that other teachers just like me feel the same. And so we need to do a better job for you guys based on that too. And call out racism, and look internally at our own biases, and what am I biased with, and how am I using that bias? Am I using it to perpetuate these issues, or am I using it to stop them? And it's something that's a growth process, and white people are coming around way late to this game, and white people like me are coming around way late to this game. We've literally elected Donald Trump in this country, and that went way too far, right? They're systematically packing the court systems with young conservative judges, and that happened because of white people. And so white people that do care, white people that are advocates, need to start making real changes, need to start again, like we're doing here, getting young people in leadership positions, getting young people of color in leadership positions. I'm watching right now what's happening with the Denver Public School Board, and Tay Anderson, who's a Black male, is literally making real changes, real structural changes with the way the system, the Denver Public Schools works, right? And him, along with Jennifer Bacon, who we need to talk, who's Montbello's representative for the school board, and an amazing Black woman. One thing I'm working on while you guys process, which I probably should shut up so you can process, is uh, finding ways again to balance what I feel I have to give you, and how much I have to give you and need to give you as fast as possible so that you guys can grow, with giving you the room to speak. And so that's what I love when I'm gone. You guys have these conversations with me. They're so much deeper because you don't have me as a crutch to lean on or fill up space or take the time. And I think that that's already, you, sir, it sounds like you're already seeing that in your class, is now you're taking up that time, right? You're literally leading in your class, which when you reported that to us, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Sarah is saying to me that she's talking the most in her class. And what a world we're going to be in when people are hearing you speak instead of me, or instead of the teacher even, or just how educated and remarkable you are, so that your peers can see that and then learn from that, and then help you with what you're working on. And so those kind of things to me are exciting. Your guys' growing voices and your write-ups are just like powerful. It's all powerful. You guys are powerful. Okay, I'm going to shut up until one of you talks.
So I am agreeing with you about the education standpoint. I mean, I agree with you about everything that you've been saying, but I would like to dive a little deeper into the education portion about how, like, it's very important that we structure education in a way that it's everybody, like it's like we look at education like one size doesn't fit all, you know? And I think, well, yeah, by us putting ourselves in position so that we are educators or contributing to society or building a better system, I think it's important that we, I mean, it's happening right now, the restructuring of what education looks like per school, you know? Um, and I mean, it all starts with the youth. And it's difficult as an educator, I understand, because I mean, you don't always know what's going on at home, what like what your kids are enduring when they're at home, and then bringing that to school and not being able to focus on school. Um, and so I'm trying to think of like how is there a way that we meet kids halfway so that when they come to school they're able to believe in themselves and believe that they can conquer the world. Not conquer, because conquer is such a colonizing word, but like do the world good and believe in themselves, you know, because there's so many, I mean, there's only so many times you can try and drill into a kid like you're amazing, you got this, but like when they're hearing from other reliable resources in their life that they're not like they're not good, it's very difficult as an educator, I assume. Just kind of bouncing off of kind of what my like experiences have been in life. And so of course we want to uplift the students and the people in the world who are kind of like the underdogs. Um, but how do you meet somebody halfway when they're not, when you don't really know what the full story is and what negative things are circulating in their head and negative things that are being told to them every single day, you know? How do you help shield them from that or help build their confidence so that that doesn't phase them? I think mental health is most important in everything, whether it's work or education. You can't do your full best or even touch the surface if you're in mental turmoil. So my heart goes out to those students. And yeah.
When I was still in high school, that's something I always used to think about because I would have like I think Clark had asked me once like what was the right way to inspire students because a lot of our students like it was a combination of the system not properly treating them right, and I think that they had got so used to that and got so much of it that they probably realized like nobody cares about them except for their family probably, and so they didn't think that school was like important, and they had got conditioned to believe that they didn't need to really care about school and education. They just like didn't see the value in it. And so that's something I've always wondered, like how do we kind of teach and inspire kids and show them that there is still value in education and they still can go far in life, they do still have potential. That's something that I've always wondered about, and also kind of in relation to what you said about if you're like not actively like fighting against like racism, then you're racist. That's in the study group that I've joined. We've been reading How to Be an Anti-Racist, which like made me connect to that because the book talked about how racism, that he kind of defines it more around policies, how like being a racist means that you're either supporting a racist policy, either your action or your inaction. And so to be an anti-racist is like actively um kind of fighting against those racist policies through your actions or belief. And so yeah, kind of connected to that.
I was thinking when you're talking more about the education side, when you're talking about teachers and having like students like us become teachers, I think that's very important to have diverse teachers. I think my whole time in education, I've only had like two Black teachers, which was like in 8th grade, Miss Reed, and then 5th grade, or 4th grade. Yeah, 4th grade. I forgot, but sometime in elementary school, I had a Black teacher, and I think that's about it. And going back to the whole police, defunding police in the public schools, and think about those troubled kids. Usually, those troubled kids, they have their own things happening at home, and they're probably reflecting the behavior they see at home. And I've also noticed that Montbello, those type of kids, when they find a teacher that actually cares about them and who's there, who like listen to them, they like do a whole 180, they change, and they start pushing themselves and they participate more in class. Back to what Ariana said, like some students don't feel like anyone cares about them. They don't feel like no matter what they do, like they won't get far. But having that one person can make a difference, and usually those teachers are that one person.
I agree, because a lot of people talk about how teachers are the people that spend the most time around students. It's not even the parents; it's the teachers. And so the teachers have a big impact on students' lives. And so I think it's important to have those teachers that look like the students, and that I think come from the same background to kind of like set an example. And so that's why it's also important for people of color to fill those roles, because I've always seen like students have really good connections with those teachers that they have like they share, I guess, similarities with, and that they can connect with on that deeper level. And it always does help, because then they have that feeling of responsibility towards kind of making that teacher proud, because when you're connected with someone that way, you want to make them proud, you don't want to disappoint them. So I think that's a big aspect of it.
One thing, and I've got a question for you when this is done. One thing that Dr. Allen said in her interview with you, Ariana, who again I hope just people watch all over the place, is another privilege that I have is I'm never questioned of where I am due to race, like that I was given, if with all the privileges I have, on top of all that, another privilege is not having to think that anybody questions where I'm at, because I was gifted that because of my race. And so um, Dr. Allen talked about that too, that she had peers at some points in her life that questioned whether she was qualified for her positions, and was she there because she was a Black woman specifically. Um, Two questions for you guys. One is, how do we again make sure that when people do get into positions of power that are of color, that they feel like that they feel like they're there because they belong there, and then also that we get society to acknowledge their race because no one's colorblind, but do not make it seem like they're in this position because they're, not white like you guys are. um, we need diverse leadership in this world. So, but you guys are my former students, and I see the potential that you have, and you're not going to lead the world because you're not white. You're going to lead the world because you're amazing. But the fact that you're not white will make you even more amazing in that power. So that's, let me start with that question. I'll get to my other one after. So how do we first of all, get people who represent our students and who are our students successful and able to go down these pathways so they can change the future? Because so much of it comes with maturation too, and time. I've got students who would sit there and swear at me in the corner of class at 12 that were some of my favorite and best students at 16 and 17, because they just matured over that time. And so the patience with students is important. But how do we get students to become, and whatever it is, teachers and therapists and all these other things that we need in this world? And then when they're there, how do we make sure that they feel valued, and that it's not like they were chosen because of their race, or only for that matter?
I think it starts young. I think it's important to have those programs early on in kids' lives to kind of lead them down the right path while they're young. Like I know that there's like a lot of programs out there like Boys and Girls Club, and like when they had it in our school, I think it was really helpful because it helped kids to stay busy and see their value. And so I think it starts young, and I think it also takes time. Like people aren't going to overnight change their views, and so I think we just have to normalize having people of color in power, so that eventually it's not something that people have to think twice about. And so I think it is going to just take time, just like normalizing it and continuing to support the kids so that the next generation of like any color of kids and any race of kids doesn't see it as like some weird thing anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. In my blog post, I wrote about how world change starts with the youth. Like building those resource centers, making sure that good funding is going to the Boys and Girls Club, and things like the Boys and Girls Club, like Friends First, which is a mentoring program, or programs like Mama Bird, where that there's funding that's going to those programs so that they can continue to reach young lives and kind of shift the like shift where somebody's life could be going. If somebody has a mentor at an early age who actually cares about them, who checks up on them weekly or daily, then like they're going to have a different view on life than say if they didn't have somebody who was there for them, who wasn't in their corner. And I really believe it's important that we start young and build resource centers and get more people like us involved, because there's more people out in the world who are like-minded as us and have the same values. And yeah.
Connecting what Ariana and Janine said about the school programs and also normalizing like seeing people of color successful. Um, I I used to be in a program called the Bridge Project, and I think that's what has led me to be who I am. In the Bridge Project, we saw so many different people in so many different career fields. We went to this one place, I can't remember the name, but it was about like rockets and building rockets, and the leadership there was mostly Black leadership, and I think that really empowered most of the students there. Like I met so many people while in that program. And yeah, I think those programs definitely make a difference in kids, because when those kids go out and they see people of color in power or doing these big things, then it inspires them and makes them think it's possible. And I also think like when you were talking about how we can make people feel valued and not think that they're in that leadership position based on their color, I think it's just reminding ourselves like how we came here, and not like if I were to be in a leadership position, I mostly focus on what I've achieved and what has led me to where I am, rather than saying, okay, I'm Black and that's why I'm here. Yeah, last year I was with Tyler and Miss Barajas in her class, Spanish class. There was only two of us, and we were talking about, me and Tyler both were talking about how we weren't enough. But then she brought up points like she's like, okay, we might say that, but if we take the time to write down everything that we've done, then it's like it's not what we think it is. Look, she said she did it with her parents, and her parents forced her to write everything that she's accomplished, and from that she was like, more confident. And I think that's something we can all practice. Is like, okay, I am here, and maybe some people might say it's due to my race, but in reality, I've done all these other things to back me up and to make me credible. I don't know, something like that.
It's common with people of color who are in leadership to feel like they are imposters or like they don't belong sometimes. And I think it's really easy to adapt the narrative that white America puts on us. So I think, yeah, it's very important that we combat that and those feelings with like positive ones, that we would look back and we're like, oh yeah, I did work my ass off to get here. I did all this, X, Y, and Z. I do deserve to be in this room. And of course it's going to take work. When I was in my freshman year of college, it was such a culture shock. I was in a classroom full of, my first class was a was a class about like how to be successful in your freshman year, and I was in class with a bunch of other white kids, well, other white kids, and I we started talking about, well, that was the year that Trump got elected. When it was during that time, the elections, 2016, and so it was like really, like really like how it is this year, kind of like high emotions, and everybody's talking about it. And I walked into that room. They were talking about politics, as it was like the beginning of the class, and I soon realized that not everybody was coming from a background of social justice. I think in NCAS, like we were kind of like drilled with like we need to fight for what's right in the world, like we need to make this a better world. We deal with these effed up systems every day, like we need to make that better for ourselves and for other people. And I walked into that room and nobody shared the same. I'm sure actually there was this one kid who was like more liberal, I guess, and he, like, I had spoken out about something about Trump, and he like had my back a little bit, like he was an ally. But aside from that, like it was very uncomfortable, and I felt like an imposter, like this, like, do I belong here? Like, am I here for the right reasons? And I mean, now that I'm an adult and I've grown up, I realize like I really, like, I could have found ways out of that negative thought loop. But you don't know what you don't know. And I mean, we grow up and we learn. I know I kind of like ADHD'd, but yeah.
Okay, I had a question I wrote down, and so I want to ask you specifically, Yasura, because I know Miss Reed, and I know she's an amazing educator. What happens when you do have an amazing educator that also represents you? What is that? How does that change your experience in school? How does that change your learning in school? How does that change your emotions in school? What is that? What did that do to you when you do have what you said, literally, like in your high school experience, you had one black teacher, and she may have even been middle school. What is that? What impact does that have on you?
I think that made me more confident in my academic. That's when I had Miss Reed. She was my English teacher in 8th grade, and that's when I started liking writing, because I like how she taught and I like what she taught. And that's when I started going to poetry, and that's like when I first realized that I wanted to write a book. I started like that somewhere after 8th grade. I was like, I'm gonna write a book when I graduate high school, and I'm gonna publish it. I think having teachers that look like you or who have similar experiences to you makes you feel more safe and more secure, especially about your future. Uh, I feel like some kids, they have these big dreams, but they don't know anyone who looks like them, or they don't think it's possible. I know a friend who wants to be a musician, but she's like, okay, I've never seen anyone who is Muslim and Black in the musical. So, and that also discourages her. Like, okay, should I even pursue this if there's like a chance that, like, there's a huge chance that I'm gonna have to, like, she doesn't even know where to start. But having, I feel like, Black teachers and teachers that look like you, it opens up a lot of doors, like mental doors. I feel like it kind of breaks down some of the things that you've been programmed to think. I feel like we don't talk much about it, but I feel like also we as people, I know that me and my siblings, most of the time when we think about like for professionals or something like that, the first person that probably comes to our mind is like probably a white person. Yeah, I think having a Black teacher or a teacher that looks like you definitely, I think it just does something, I feel like, mentally to you. I feel like it just encourages you more and motivates you more. I remember when the first time, it was also 8th grade, when I saw my first time seeing a Muslim teacher. And I was like that, just, even though she was just a sub, I was like mind blown, because I've never seen like a Muslim teacher like at all. yeah, I think it makes a huge difference to students' lives and their futures.
Um, I've had two Black teachers. Um, w- my, let's see, in middle school at McGlone, it was Miss Jenkins. She was really nice. And then in high school, um, well, Miss Reed wasn't really my teacher, but she was really nice to me. And I kind of built a relationship with her a little bit, like, which was nice. Zero Indigenous teachers, zero. Um, so of course, I think it's important that we are led by teachers who, shares experiences with us, have similar backgrounds or understandings, of what it is like to live in brown or black skin. It's a different level of understanding. And then looking back and realizing how many teachers were just kind of ignorant to that, especially um, I used to live in okay, so me and my family, we moved around a lot in my earlier years. And so in Arvada, I went to school for a little bit for elementary school in Lakewood. I went to school and I was always, or actually, I was one of the people of color in the class. There was never any black or brown teachers um, teaching, but there was always like maybe one black kid and then myself. Um, and I remember we would kind of get picked on sometimes, or like singled out um, in elementary school. And when we would bring that to the teacher's attention, they didn't really know how to deal with that. They kind of swept it under the rug, like thought like kids will be kids. But I think it definitely changes a kid's trajectory in life and understanding of their self-worth and um, kind of like what's possible for them. Because in white America, education that's made for the colonizers instead of the colonized, it's very like this system is built for you to benefit you, and if you are not what fits in this little box, then it does not work for you, and so I mean that starts young, and that realization starts young, but you internalize it and you don't really realize it until you're old enough to realize it and then know how to work through that. So it's definitely important that there are educators and leaders in our lives that look like us. And yeah, because then we're able to build better relationships and just better understanding, I guess.
And this makes me think of, too, at the top, the Secretary of Education, I don't even know how to pronounce her name, um, is a rich white woman that literally bought her position. She literally donated to Trump and appointed her, and that's legal is just insane. She's got no educational experience, which is just insane. She's never been a teacher, which is just insane. And she's dictating how education works in this country for everyone. That it's just a supportive environment. I love that you talked about education um, for the people that were colonized, not the colonizers. That's so true, right? We have a very much I don't even know the proper term for it, but that you are teaching white American history. We are teaching that these white men did everything great and that's it, and there's no complexity to them, and they weren't slave holders and all this, and asking you guys what you feel about that. Well, let me ask you that right now. What are your thoughts about these statues coming down currently, ranging from Confederate statues to Columbus statues? As you see that, I know how it makes me feel. How does it make you feel to see this happening in the world? That people are literally just not waiting for this change to happen. They're saying that this needs to happen now.
I saw a post on Facebook about how Christopher Columbus was beheaded, well, his statue, and I hearted that status. So that says how I feel. Yeah. I remember in like well, looking back, and I know it's still going on today. These like kids aren't being taught real history. They're being taught like this sugar-coated lie about how Christopher Columbus was like this amazing explorer, and we pretty much glorify a rapist slash war criminal slash all the above. And we're like feeding these children these lies. And in freaking kindergarten, we have children dress up like little like little Indians, because that's what they call them. And I remembered little Indians and pilgrims, and not really talking about what actually went down, why life is the way it is now, and where are Native Americans now, because you talk to a lot of people still and they're like, oh, I didn't know you guys still existed. Like that's really there's so many people who will come up to me and ask me, oh, what are you Asian, are you or I'll have a Karen like tell me to go back to my country. And I'll be like, well, I'm Native American, I'm Navajo, I'm Apache, Pawnee, I'm indigenous, I'm from here. What are you talking about, lady? And they'll have like this shocked look on their face, like, thought you guys were like exterminated. So not that that's ever been said to me, but something along the lines, it's pretty much what they get to. And it's crazy to kind of see a part of it's happening to Black brothers and sisters as well. Is like our culture is being erased, our history is being erased from these textbooks, and from like people aren't getting the true story. In high school we learn about history, but about slavery, and then that's it. They're like, oh, but then we had segregation, and then that ended, and so now here we are, we're all good now. And like, no, that's not true. And so when I see these statues being torn down, I'm like, yeah, F the system. Like, we're making change, like people are waking up. And like I kind of feel like lighthearted, like, yeah.
I also feel like having those statues up kind of shows support, and by taking them down, it's showing that we don't support that anymore. Like if you put up a flag of a certain, like if you put up Bronco flags up, people are gonna automatically assume you're a fan of the Broncos. So why wouldn't people assume that we're still a fan of everything that has happened and that we approve of everything that has happened? Yeah, so that's what I was thinking of when they're taking it down. It's like, okay, we're starting to break down what we see and what we support. I was gonna say something else, but I forgot what I was gonna say. But yeah.
I had saw a post on Facebook where it was saying that a lot of people are saying that like the protests and all that stuff are unpatriotic, but protesting and trying to actively make your country better is more patriotic. And like that just made me really think about the fact that like a lot of these people that are stuck in the past and wanting to support these things are like trying to feel like patriotic and nationalistic about they try to strip away all the bad stuff from the history as if it's not like you can't like as if you can, but you can't strip the bad away. Like people that support the Confederate flag and say it's their history don't realize that like you're supporting a negative history. Like it's different to support your ancestral roots from like the country in Europe that you're from, but to support the like violent history of America and say that that's your history is just like it's like ignorant almost, because you're supporting a history that's based off of violence. And so yeah, it's like taking on the statues is kind of a step forward of making the country a place where we can all be proud of.
Going back to what you said about being patriotic and how rioting and protesting isn't patriotic, but like people saw it was patriotic to go protest during the coronavirus, risking many people's lives so people could get haircuts. how's that patriotic? But protesting to keep people alive isn't. No, I remember what I was gonna say. So during my internship, my first, I think it was 10th grade, at the museum, my first year. We're about to leave to go home, and I was with this girl that I worked with, and we were talking to my mentor, and they were talking about race and all of that, and she was talking about how Columbus, took over, like discovered America, and I thought like everybody knew that Columbus like didn't discover America, that Native Americans were there, and that he accidentally fell onto America, and how Native Americans were nice to him, and he even wrote in his diary how nice they were and how like giving they were, but then he started to lie about like they were savages and all this stuff, but she didn't know that. And like when she was talking about it, I was like, what? But my mentor, he ended up like explaining the whole thing to her, and she was like mind blown. She's like, what? I've never learned this. And she's like one of the top students in her school, I know that. So I think it's something that we definitely have to teach in school more. I remember I told my siblings that like technically Christopher Columbus did not discover America, and they were also mind blown. And I think just learning those things makes a difference.
You guys, my one of my original things, sorry Janine, I'll let you go in a minute, what with this was kind of sharing my story to help move white people. I'm realizing when I'm watching you, it's your story that I need to share to help move white people and share these conversations with them, because this is powerful for me. So I'm going to shut up and let you talk more.
I was listening to this podcast. I love podcasts. But anyways, the topic was kind of like what's going on right now, and one of the ladies, this powerful Black woman, she's like triple majored and has like so many degrees under her belt. It's crazy. And she said something like, okay, so you're upset, you see what's going on and you are angry. Are you angry enough to go study law yet? Are you angry enough to get involved in politics? And I'm like, oof, wow, yeah, like that, because that was kind of like my call to action. Like, man, like you're right. Why we need to be studying law? We need to be involved in politics. That is the most loving thing we could do for people like us, for our brothers and sisters, young and old, like that is the best that we can do, is involve ourselves in what matters in America, law and politics. That's how these structures are embedded, and we need to embed ourselves and then switch everything up. So yeah.
This kind of reminds me of knowledge is power. I remember when I was part of the Human Rights Club, we learned about all the human rights. And then when I learned them, I was like, well, this is a human right violation that's happening in the United States. Like I just started pointing things out. I'm like, well, this is wrong. This goes against the human rights, declarations of human rights. And I think if more people know their rights and more people know where they stand, the more likely they are to use it. Yeah, I think that's important.
That just makes me think about how everything that happens is systematic. Like people try to bring the problem down to an individualistic level. Like, well, if people just made better decisions, or if people just did this, and if people just did that. But you can't expect every single person to rise above the circumstances that like a country, like if a country's not made to work for people, you can't expect all of them to somehow just jump over the barrier. Like, a lot of people know and realize that America has a bad history, but they expect people to just ignore that, and like if they make the right decisions, every person will can overcome it. And like while there are exceptional people that kind of jump over those barriers, not everybody can. It's just unrealistic to believe that. And so it's a systematic issue that needs to be addressed, and a lot of people kind of try to like not address the root problem. But that's why, like you guys are saying, it's important to educate ourselves, because in order to fight the system we have to understand it. And so education is definitely a big part of it.
I've been watching, well, I haven't really been watching, but I saw this one post about like black celebrities kind of talking about how racism doesn't exist, because how could racism exist when they are where they are? And of course, all of these white people in the comments are like, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. Like, good for that guy. He's talking the truth. And I'm blown away, because like, just because there's this one story of this black man who is able, after fighting, after his parents probably fought that fight to get him where he is so hard, he kind of just like discounts like the fact that, like, just because he's successful and doesn't have to deal with the racism that his brothers and sisters in this country do have to deal with, like it he just kind of like completely discounts that there's I completely forgot where I was going with that. Pretty much, I'm blown away. And like, there's so many people who are like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. And I forgot my punchline. It's ADHD. And also, never mind. But
I think going back to what you both said about the system not working for Black people, I was watching this one video of this woman. I don't know where she was, but she was talking to these people, these like a bunch of old white men, and she was talking about how she went to college, she has her bachelor's degree, she works 2 different jobs, but she still struggles to make ends meet. And I think people in America think, oh, go to college, get a job, and you're fine, you're gonna be at the top. But it takes so much more than that. Yeah, I think people think it's so easy, like, work hard and you will have your whole life, in front of you. But it's like there's so much more, barriers. Like what Ariana said, is you can't expect people to thrive in a system that was made to, keep them down. So that's what I wanted to add.
like it seems like people love to hear that one story about that one successful person of color who, through all trials and tribulations, managed to become successful and get ahead of what is known as systemic racism. And like, people just love to hear about that. And yeah, it's very important that we educate ourselves, and it's draining to educate others, but some people feel called to do so. Not everybody needs to. I guess that's why we rely on our allies. And yes, knowledge is power.
A big argument that I feel like some people try to make is that we aren't our ancestors, like, slavery is over. None of us were slaves, so there's no point complaining about it, and like, it doesn't affect anybody today. But a lot of things that, like, when people say this, that they don't realize is like, your ancestors' lives that impact you. Like, the present doesn't exist in a void. Like, we didn't just like we weren't born today, and like, all of the problems of the past don't affect now. Like, the past has consequences, and that's something a lot of people don't realize. So like, if your ancestors were systematically held down and were poor, it's gonna obviously you're not obviously gonna it's gonna you're gonna have to work harder to achieve things in life. And everybody starts off in different positions in life. And so while a lot of like people of color try to say like, well, I did this and I did that, so anybody can do it, they just have to make better decisions. Well, even people of color start off in different positions of life. And so we can't just ignore the past, and like, generational wealth is real. So if your parents are poor, you're less likely to just become rich. It's never just that easy.
Yeah, I get what you said about the past having consequences. I was reading this thing about like people like you were saying, how just because you weren't the slave or you didn't go through that, it doesn't mean it hasn't impacted you. I was reading this one article about how if mothers went through like a traumatic experience while they're pregnant and they have all this other stuff and unresolved issues, that in a way kind of passes on to the child when they're born. I think that's kind of similar to life in general. Like if your family has like all these issues and you've gone through all this stuff and you have generations of trauma and issues that all passes down, just like wealth, if you're born into a wealthy family, that all passes down to you. And that's something that we need to remind ourselves.
How do you, and this is putting you on the spot, and you may not have an answer to this, nor is it should be your problem. How do you explain? I think I explain privilege by my own privileges, and the privilege again that I have no traumatic experiences coming into life. Privilege that I was born to a family where literally my mother, who's staying with us right now, has told me my whole life, you can do anything. Anything you want to do, I will support you on, and you can do it. And then also living in a society where I see that I can do it, and I know that that's possible, and having that confidence. So it's just such a different lived experience. But how do you talk to, or how do you think we can convince people, or should we even care about that? Convince people that do, those white people in those chat rooms, Janine, that are saying, yeah, this person is making it, and they overcame obstacles. Oprah did it, so anybody can do it. And Oprah had a tough life, but look at her; she pulled herself up by her bootstraps. How do you deal with that component of it, where people just don't get it, and also how does that again even make it more heavy on you that you see that other people think you should just be able to do that? How do you internalize? I guess this is a question I want to ask you guys. How does race? Okay, I'm gonna clean slate. How does racism look in your life and affect your life? How have you been affected personally by racism? And then how has that racism been internalized by you? Because this is something that's so foreign to me. I want you to talk so that I can share this with, again, people like me, who are allies, but maybe still not aware of why they need to even push harder and change these systems, because it all is systemic. How has racism affected you in your personal life? And then how have you often internalized that to make your life even more difficult?
Um, I think racism, I think this is why I have like a lot of major identity issues, and it's hard for me to accept the person I am, and I try to like get away from culture, and I try to get away from like stereotypes of, you know, and I don't think it's someone's responsibility to stay away from these stereotypes. Um, but I think since coming to America, since I am like born from Africa, I've had a lot of people telling me go back to your country, or you're not good enough, or all this other stuff based on my race. And I think as a little kid, I tried to change that about myself. Um, I remember I would get mad if I got darker or spent too much time in the sun, because I naturally tan. I naturally get darker in, like during summer, and I would always get mad at that fact. I was like, oh my god. Um, and I also saw younger version of me valued more lighter skinned people and valued, you know, that. And I feel like it also contributed to my imposter syndrome as of I don't belong here. Like this is wasn't meant for me. I wasn't meant to be here. I wasn't meant to be at the top of my class. I wasn't meant to do all these other things. Um, yeah, I think racism has contributed to the way I view myself and my self identity, and I'm trying to change that and be accepting of, you know, everything.
Yeah, I definitely kind of have similar experiences growing up. On the media, we would always see girls with like lighter complexions and like very fine hair. And so when me and my sister were young, we'd always tell my mom that we wanted straight hair, and so we'd get it permed, and like that kind of affected our self-esteem at a young age because we felt like how we were, like and what we were born with wasn't good enough. And then growing up and going to school, I've always been like more quiet, and I've always been like into books and everything like that. And so a lot of kids would always tell me like you, like I acted white or I would sound white. And so just growing up thinking that I don't fit in with like other black kids, I kind of internalized that, thinking that like there was a certain way to act or be, like you had to be a certain way to be black. Just hearing that a lot.
Um, that's kind of a. I'm only now learning. Well, actually, I've been learning about it for a couple of years now, but I used to kind of be ashamed at the fact that I was am Native, because I didn't really feel like I fit into that group or stereotype. I don't know. Like I don't know much about my culture. I'm learning. It's my job to do that now. Um, and I mean, I'm not a part of I didn't grow up on a res. I have family who did, um, which at one point it's like a blessing that I grew up in modern day America, but at the same time I didn't grow up with that community and that closeness of knowing what my culture is. And so I guess you can define it as kind of an identity crisis. I remember when I was in middle school, people would ask me what I am, and I would tell them, I would lie and say that I was Mexican because it was just easier. And then they would try to speak to me in Spanish, and I would be like, I didn't see this one coming. Um, and so, like, learning how to kind of navigate the lies that society has kind of told me about myself, and kind of internalizing like I should feel ashamed, I should feel lost, but instead of agreeing with that, now I'm switching the narrative. I'm like, no, it's my responsibility to be a part of those communities, to find Sophia, to find my my heritage, learn more about it, and it's kind of a powerful thing to kind of take back that and own that, and how I deal with, like, oh my goodness, give me 1 second. Here, baby, you are an ornery one this morning. There you go. So how I have learned to deal with like racism, like being made fun of, or told to go back to my country, or being followed in the store. I haven't perfected that one yet. I don't really know. I remember one time when I was living in Greeley, I went to the Ulta in Greeley, and there was a white lady, a security guard, an older white lady, who I didn't realize at first she was following me everywhere. And when I came back up to the front, she threw a bag at me, telling me that I could put the items that I stole into that bag. And I was so embarrassed, and I didn't really know how to react to that. I had a lot of anger, and so I ended up calling her a white hag, which in hindsight wasn't really helpful, but made me feel good at the time. And then when I got to the car, I realized what had happened. There was a group of young white girls in the store who were like looking at me and laughing at me, kind of, and I thought that I remembered them like talking to the guard at one point. And as this was happening, I wasn't really aware of what was going on. I just thought people were being weird. I'm really naive sometimes. And so I believe that they told her that I stole. And so she was following me around, and that's what happened. And then when she threw the bag at me, they kind of like chuckled and laughed, and it was weird, really weird experience. I went to the car and cried, called my mom, and of course that's nothing that like people with darker skin tones have to experience. That's very minute on a scale, I mean, like, something that I realize is I don't fear for my life because of my skin tone, that's a privilege. And but how I internalize all that, and as I'm learning how to not, and how to use all of that in a good way by fighting for what's right, and fighting so that my kids don't need to experience stuff like that, being discriminated against because of their brown skin, or because they look like they are Mexican, and being told to go back to their country, or the so that people don't have to experience that in general, that hate. So I know that was a mouthful.
I want to add on something about internalized racism. I think mostly my culture, or like people I know, like I know a lot of people who do this, due to beauty standards, and most beautiful people consider, like, light skinned girls, or white girls, or all this stuff. And I know some people who like bleach their skin. There's like products like make you lighter, and that's like something that's kind of normalized, at least in my little social, like, cultural group thing, that people like put on skin bleaching to make themselves get lighter, so that way they look more beautiful, or like more, amazing. And I think racism has to do something like that. But the lighter you are, the more beautiful you are, which I don't agree with. But yeah.
This is like a weird experience that's happened to me sometimes. It's like having strangers ask to touch your hair. Like I remember I was doing like an internship, and then I had like my hair was like twisted. And then like some like random lady asked if she can come up and touch my hair. And like I always heard people talking about it, but I never knew people really did it. And I'm just like what makes people like wanna ask a stranger? Like I don't know, it's just weird to me. Or like we went to a concert, and it was like a lot of white people there. Me, my sister, my mom, and there was just a lot of white girls asking Ava about her hair and braids, and they're asking how long her real hair is, and all these like weird questions that you just don't ask strangers.
Yeah, that's something I've dealt with too. I have pretty long curly hair, and I remember once I was fixing in class, and I thought no one was looking, and people were like, "Wait, are you sure you're black? Like, are you sure you're not like mixed with something?" And I'm like, "Nope, born in Africa to both African parents." Yeah, that's something I've, like, people that are like, "What's your secret? Like, what do you put in it? Like, what do you make it? What do you use to make it grow?" And I'm like, "Nothing. It's just there." Yeah, I think people have this perception. Yeah, the whole thing, like how long your hair actually is. I remember once me and my friend were staying after school at NCIS, and these DCIS dudes are like, "Are you bald under there? Is that why you wear it? Like, are you like, what's up?" And I'm just like, "It's long. I have long hair." They're like, "There's like no way though. Like there's no way you can have long hair." Um, but yeah, that's something, like you said, it's kind of weird that people want to just come up to you and want to touch your hair. Like I won't go up to some random girl and be like, "Hey, you have like really nice brown hair. Can I touch it?" I don't know.
For not you guys, I guess this is kind of the work that we're doing. So I do think it's our place, but I don't think it's people's of color's place to educate white people about so many things, because you're dealing with all this stuff and exhaustion. That's another privilege that we have. Like when white people wake up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I want help," and they reach out to um, their friends of color and say, like, "What can I do? How can I help you with this?" And there are tons of resources available. And the fight on your own for yourself is exhausting. um, Saying that though, for because I do think, and you guys state stuff so eloquently and beautifully, and how do so advocates like myself, white people like myself, that do see that these systems are unjust, see that racism is still very real in this country, see that Black lives do matter. How do we? What should we expect from advocates from your guys' viewpoint? How can white people help this cause and help change these things?
I think it's like what you're doing. Start realizing how someone or people have contributed to racism, and how they can change that, and how they can change how they're living in order to start breaking down these patterns that we have created in society. and sharing their stories also about what's going on. I feel like some people might not see the privilege because they're like in it. You can't really see it if you're in it. I was with this one girl at NCIS, and she, because NCIS doesn't have that many white students, and she was talking about white privilege, and she's like, white privilege doesn't exist because, like, I'm also not Bello, I'm also poor, I'm also all these things, I'm also a low income person, like, I don't have to, and then she was talking about how Black people have privilege because people are, like, looking for Black people to hire for diversity reasons, and I don't think she's I feel like for her it would probably be easier for her to like get out of poverty than it would from someone who was you know, Black and in the same position as her. But I think that's something people also use is like, well, there's also poor white people, there's also poor white people who are poverty, who also struggle and who also use food stamps. And I think we need to start, you know, looking into those thought patterns.
What I kind of use to combat that is like, okay, yes, and I always like, because I do experience white privilege, I am of lighter skin tone, I kind of find that common ground. I tell people like, yeah, of course you guys don't have that privilege. But what I say is I go about it like, okay, yes, it does exist. White privilege does exist, in fact. Even me, Indigenous person, experiences white privilege because of my lighter skin tone. And what that means is, yes, we may go through struggles. Everybody struggles. But the factor that doesn't make your life harder is your skin tone. And that is what white privilege is. Would that be accurate? I mean, it's so much deeper than that, of course, but that's kind of like where I kind of help people to like realize, like, yeah, that's like, are you catching on? You know what I mean?
I think it's also important for people to just listen and like use whatever platforms they have, but like without being careful of trying to overtake like because a lot of like people probably think that like, or like some mentality, not a lot, but like some mentalities probably think that like people of color can't help themselves, they can't save themselves, and so that's kind of where like the white savior trope comes in, is that like I need to step in and save them myself. And so just understanding that like it's not like we can work together and help each other. Like we don't need like one person to stand up for all people. We just need to stand up for each other and be there for each other.
Yeah, I don't like when people do that. I have had people who are like, oh, you're African American and you know you have all these things against you, let me help you, like I'll be the one to take you out of this, like you need me. And it's like I appreciate the help and support, but I don't like it when people are like force it on you, you know, they're like, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna save you, and it's like, I don't need to be saved. Like I don't need you. There's other resources out there. There's other help. It's one thing to like, hey, what can I do? Rather than saying, I learned this in anthropology too, where if you're doing an ethnograph or trying to help a certain community, you don't go into that community saying, okay, I have all these benefits and I'm going to use it and I'm going to help you. You go into that community saying, okay, I'm not from this community. I don't understand your problems and what's going on. You tell me what you need me to do, and I will use what I have, my resources, to help you, which is different from coming in and saying, okay, I'm more knowledgeable than you, I have way much more, you know, all this more than you, so I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna fix everything that needs to be fixed. Because if you haven't experienced what I experienced, if you haven't been in my life, you don't know where to begin with or what to fix. You can't just come in and assume it's kind of like that. I think that kind of has privilege, thinking that you know everything, that you have, you know, that you have this power to fix everyone. And it's like, that's not it. That's not how you should be going about this. You should be asking, what you can do instead of saying this is, if that makes sense.
I think that's why it's also important to have people of color in power, because they come from that like similar background, and like they can help to um show like the people that they're helping that like they understand, like they have that kind of element. And like I don't think like all people of power in power should be of color, but I think that's why it's important to have a good mix of them, because you have like the allies, and then you also have the people that have that same background as the people that they're like as the people. And so I think that's why it's also important.
How can we live that more? I live that more. I use I a lot, and when I listen to myself speak, I think you guys know it's coming from the right place. But I'm seeing these social media posts saying things like, "This isn't just a flavor of the week. Like this, you need to keep marching, and we need people to keep pushing this forward, and this needs to not end here." What feedback can you give? And not really feedback, I guess. How can this be done with Mama Bird? How can I help you, Yasura? And how can I help you, Aaron? And how can I help you, Janine, in a way that, and I think you guys know that this is not about me at all for me, but I guess it still is. This is something that I feel I have to do for you, though. I'm doing it for the right reasons and to empower you so that you can change the world and open doors for you. But there still is a component of what I feel I have to bring to the table. And so, Yusura, maybe I'll ask you, because you said that too. What kind of things can I do better, or we do better too, to value what you're talking about? That it's that savior complex I've heard before, and so many people too do like literally go to Africa to feel good about themselves, and then they stop doing it. And how do you value the work that people did? Because it is great. Because I haven't gone to Africa to build a house for anybody, but they go there and then they come back and do racist shit and post themselves in blackface or whatever it is, like just crazy dichotomies. How do we do that with Mama Bird specifically? How can we value your guys, what you bring to the table, and move the world forward as much as possible with that, in a way that's not kind of, because I see it from a marketing standpoint too. Again, with our target market with Mama Bird interviews is really people like me who want to feel good about themselves, want to do something good to move the world forward, but almost they're going to be doing it for that reason. I think we're literally going to be like tricking them into so often something that's going to be a valuable product for them, but also tricking them into, not tricking them, but having them support you, because that's the real important cause with this, and they're going to get something that they're really going to value. But how do we value both sides of that, I guess? How do we, I don't know, that's kind of a rambling thing, but what are your responses to that? And if you don't have one, then that's okay at this moment.
Yeah, I don't know how I would answer that question. I feel like people I feel like we I feel like racism and what's currently happening is a difficult thing to like figure out. I think there's so much more. I don't think we could just change stuff overnight. And I agree with the let's not make this a trend. Some people might see this as like, oh, this is gonna last a couple of weeks and then we're gonna move on to the next thing. But I don't think if we continue that, then this will happen for years and years. These protests over and over and over, and we'll be in the same place. We need to make sure that we aren't using this as some like social media trend to like pretend like you were saying, people going to Africa to help, and that does help. I was watching this one video about how that can kind of be harmful. It's once you leave, it kind of can make more problems than benefit, because you're going into this community and you're telling them that you need us in order to kind of be successful. You need us in order to have a good life. It's another thing to go in saying we can help you build this life. Like I was watching this one video and this dude was talking about how when they went there, they wouldn't let any of the community people help out. The teenagers who were there, the white teenagers who were there would only do the work. They wouldn't let community members or like, oh, let me help you build this thing, or let me help you move some stuff around. And that made them, like the people in the community, feel like they weren't capable of, building their own things. They weren't capable of helping themselves. And that's something that I think we need to change. Is not going back to I think that's what we're doing with Bird Media. There's like 3 of us who like have totally different experiences, and you're not coming to us like saying you need me to make you go here. You're coming to us and you're saying I have these experiences and I believe in you guys, and maybe we could put our experiences and our values together to create this great thing. And I think that's how we should go about it, instead of trying to, going back to what I was saying about like this whole complex of you can only live a good life if I'm around, if I can help you. We need to start, I don't know, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like it's good and it's okay to want to help, to go into these communities and like, because like that's what's needed is like these communities they need help, but they need to be shown how to help themselves. Like people can't just keep going in and saying, okay, I'm gonna do this and do that for you. What a lot of these communities need is they need like role models and leaders to go in and show them like this is how you do this and this is how you do that, so they can learn how to help themselves and continue to help their family and their kids. And like they just need, like a lot of them have what it takes. They just need the resources, and that's a big thing. Is like it's not that they lack the ability. A lot of times they just lack the resources. So that's also what I think it's important.
I've seen that kind of in our own community as well, Mount. I remember one summer, I was walking past the park that I live by. I think it's called, well, I don't live by anymore, but I lived by, my family lives by, this Silverman Park, just down the road from Montbello High School. And I saw like this truck of white kids. I know that they weren't from our neighborhood because the shirts that they were wearing, I don't remember what they were. I think it was like I don't remember what part of Colorado it said. But anyways, like they were planting trees in our park, which is nice, which is amazing. But like me, nobody from the neighborhood was there with them. They were kind of just like from my standpoint, it kind of looked like they were just doing it as like a, like, when you put on your application for college that you do charity work, something like that, and I was just kind of like weirded out. Like, I don't know these people aren't from here. Like I've never seen them. I mean, and I was always at the Silverman Park with my brothers. I don't know, but yeah, it's not that like these communities don't want it, it's that like lacking resources, I guess, like how you said. Yeah.
I also think that's true for schools. I feel like a lot of people see kids at Montbello or NCIS as like not smart or not as capable, but it's like our school has a lot of smart kids. We just don't have the resources. I think junior year for physics, we didn't have any like physics textbooks or any of that. So, and most of the time we don't have consistent teachers. We have like, I remember my first semester of all junior year for my science class, we had no teacher. We had a sub coming in and out. So how are you supposed to learn content when you have like different people coming in and out, teaching you different things that, doesn't have like a journey to it or like a plan to it. So that's what kind of gets me mad sometimes when they're like, oh, these poor schools, these kids are so, they're not educated, they're not all this. But it's like, no, there's some smart kids who are willing to work for it, but we don't have the resources and we don't have, the funding. Because I feel like if we did, you would see so much more out of our students.
I remember my sophomore year, I want to say, I took Spanish, and that year I think we had 3 Spanish teachers. So it was, yeah, how do you learn when there's such inconsistency. I think what the first teacher left because she got a better gig. She at a different school where she'd be able to like go to the mountains and do these retreats or something. And she was like telling the class, like kind of guilt tripping us not to like have negative feelings towards her, you know? And it was just very interesting. Like, you didn't have to come teach her, you know, if you were planning to leave 3 months in, you could have just waited for that better gig. And then I remember my junior year, I took Spanish again, and I think that Spanish teacher has stayed with NCAS. I think, I'm not too sure. But yeah. Oh, and then there was Miss Bengali. She was really nice. But yeah, the turnover in Montbello schools is crazy. It's kind of like teachers are kind of put there as like a kind of just like they're fresh out of college or something, or fresh out of their whatever, and they need some job experience, and they kind of just toss them out on Montbello, and they're like, oh, have fun until they get a better gig. So it's not fair to the students at all. And that is also a factor that plays into like students not really caring about school because they think like, oh, yeah, the teachers are just gonna leave anyways, like they don't care about us. So
I think that's where it comes to like a systemic issue over an individualistic one, once again, because like all these problems stem from the system not working. And so we can't just blame it on like every single, because like if you blame it on like the people, then you're saying that something is intrinsically wrong with like, because like obviously if you're going to say that it's the people's fault, then like you're kind of arguing that these people intrinsically have something wrong where they can't achieve these high things. And so it's basically like kind of leading into that racism where you're saying, oh, because they're this race they can't achieve it, versus saying that, well, obviously if all these people aren't able to achieve things in life, then there has to be like an underlying reason behind it. So that's where it comes into the system. I think it's like the system is not set up to allow them to succeed. And so we have to figure out where the system went wrong and how to correct it, and like what resources they need to kind of be equalized.
Adding on what you said about the system, I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, a lot of people don't think the system has an impact. I was watching this one video, and this daughter was telling her parents how racism exists, but the father was like, "No, I work in those neighborhoods. Those kids, they choose to be there. They choose to be in the ghettos. They choose that type of life." And it's like, no, we don't choose those lives. Back to what we're saying about the schools, those teachers constantly leaving and does impact because teachers are important, and that teacher-student relationship is very important. But if you see that people don't even want to work with you, like, oh, these people don't want to come and teach us. These people don't want to, these people don't believe in us. It's also hard for students to get closer to teachers. I realized that too in my time at NCAS. At first, I was like very open to making relationship with teachers and learning about them. But then over time, it's like, why bother investing my time into these teachers when probably a couple minutes in they will leave? And I think that's what a lot of students are like, and why we have some behavioral issues. My gym class, we had a new gym teacher this year, and everybody was like, why bother listening to him? Why bother giving him this respect when we know that he won't be here next year? We know he won't be back. So why should we care if he doesn't care? Why should we care if he's going to end up leaving? And that ends up, setting some students up for failure if, they aren't trying in schools because they think teachers aren't there for them. They think teachers don't care for them. So people aren't choosing. They're not choosing to like stay, in the ghettos. They're not choosing to stay in poverty. It's just they're set up to stay there. They're set up, to basically fail in a way.